Today I'm going to show how to insulate a cantilever. This particular cantilever is a 12-inch cantilever on a dormered second floor of a Cape style house, and this particular one has plumbing running through it, so very important to insulate this, especially for the Northeast winters. And you can see, I'll get you a closer look, but basically in between all these floor joists, goes right under the floor of the second floor, and even with closed up soffit on the outside here would definitely be breezy and cold, particularly with a bathroom going above there. So that's the project for the next couple of days. A brief list of materials here. We have some 1-inch rigid foam, just some scrap cardboard, insulation, of course, contractor glue, some spray foam, window and door spray foam, measuring, cutting tools, a couple of saws, and a straight edge 1/2-inch plywood. That's basically the material list. It's a bit of a challenging project, but with anybody who's relatively handy and detail oriented should be able to do this with a little time and effort. This is a closer look at underneath the cantilever, and you could see in between all the joists, this is all open air. Probability of air getting in here during cold months, humidity during warm months, so forth. So step one is to pack insulation in between these joists the best you can. Ideally, you can get to these spaces from up above, but if not, you can try to get it as deep into these crevices as you can. And to be a little bit on the crafty side, you take your cardboard and you want to create these templates. And these templates should fit within these voids. Let's see if we can get this in here. Sorry for the camera work. And you can see, you can kind of cut these around any obstructions or any areas to get a nice tight fit. You can use the scraps that you cut out to kind of manipulate and massage some of the open spaces around this. And you just go down your cantilever. Obviously, it's much easier if you don't have things like plumbing and electric and venting and all that sort of stuff sticking out through. But that's the general idea for step one, is to create these cardboard templates that you will use then to transfer onto the other material, the final material to put on here. So as you can see, here's a series of cardboard templates that I used. I used a little triangle square there, and any of these materials that you cut out you can use to manipulate the size of the opening by just kind of cutting the general shape. Do some measuring. You could be as precise as you need to be, but then you could manipulate these openings by using that scrap to alter the amount of space in between. And the goal is to try to get these as tight as you can, because ultimately you're going to have to seal around those openings, any openings that are there, to try and alleviate any of the spaces that could potentially get air. You can see you kind of have to puzzle it together, may have to create multiple pieces, but this is sort of the thing that takes the most amount of time. So kind of take your time doing this, because this kind of dictates the rest of the project. And what you can see here is, on the next step, is you transfer these cardboard templates into plywood. So our 1/2-inch plywood. And you can see here's my template. The template sort of fits over this. vice versa, and you just trace around your template and then cut out the plywood, and then you can just massage the plywood as you put it up in the space to get a nice tight fit, as tight as you can. For instance, I had to carve out a bit on this side in a few different weird jagged edges to go around some of the piping, the plumbing that's coming out through there. So that's the next step. So to recap, you go up into the up into the cantilever, and you can get a long piece of cardboard, as long as you can hold up in there, and sort of trace around some of the spaces. You can measure also and cut them out, and then transfer them to plywood. And importantly, just make sure before you install any of this that you do pack those joists underneath the floor with as much insulation as possible. So you get the insulation, ultimately you'll get the insulation up inside the joist, you get a layer of plywood that covers the joists, and you glue that with contractor glue, and then put some screws in there to hold that in. And then you'll put some rigid foam board around the cantilever edges, and then fill the rest of the voids with either spray foam or pack it with insulation. And then you'll do the same thing for the bottom. You'll pack the bottom with a rigid foam, and then finally on the very bottom close off the cantilever with 1/2 inch plywood, and then you could add your siding, soffit, so forth and so on, or AZAC, whatever you want to do to that. So that's what we're going to be working on. Now you see what I've done here. I'll try to hold the camera as steady as possible. By the way, I apologize for the quality camera work. This is not something I really do, but I didn't see any good YouTube videos on how to address the problem that I was trying to solve, so I figured I would put this together. So what I've done here is I kind of use the wood piece, the 1/2 inch plywood piece, as a template for my rigid foam, and I just went around with a pencil and traced this area. And you're gonna have to do this in chunks. So what I've done is basically trace this around, and then I turned, let's see if I can do this. I've turned this over and just scored a little line around the side of the plywood there. Or is it right there? Just indicating where I left off here, so that on the next piece of foam I know where to line it up. And you can do these in however many chunks that you want to do. That'll be easier to kind of manipulate once you get them up into the cantilever. And I just use these clips to hold this on. And so now, once I remove this, you can now see the shape. I think you can see the shape that I have to cut out. And I do it, a little trick is I do it with the openings towards the edge, because I found it's easier to kind of cut these vertical pieces out all in one shot from the edge without having to kind of try to do them from one side or use a smaller piece. And then I go ahead and do these horizontal ones last and just pop the pieces out. So that's kind of a little trick, which is why I have this oriented towards the edge of the foam. Got to mention another trick is just X out, put a little X on the pieces that you're actually going to pop out, because this could get, believe it or not, a little confusing where you might cut out the wrong section. So a little tip is just put a little indicator in, so that you know which one to notch out. Here's kind of the rough shape cut out. So I use the circular saw for the verticals here, and the horizontal I use the little edging tool. It's just easier to get into these small spaces. And then of course, you know, as you test fit this, you can sand these down, use a little piece of sandpaper. Ultimately you'll fill any gaps with with spray foam and stuff like that to get it all solid. But I just cut the line across here, and then I have the first piece. So we'll repeat this for each one of the plywood templates that we created, and we should have, now you can start seeing the kind of layer, right? You'll have this over, you'll have the insulation packed in the joist, and you'll have this plywood as a layer, and then you'll have the rigid foam as a layer, and then we'll spray foam around all the little edges and gaps, and then we'll pack the void in between it with insulation. All right, there you go. First one done, or mocked in anyway. You can see everything's labeled and the position it goes in. You have the wood, plywood behind it, rigid foam. Yeah. So now we just have a few more of these to do, and then we're all prepped to start putting everything together. All right, a couple hours later, it's everything cut out, ready to go. They're all with their templates, all labeled. Everything labeled and numbered. Oh. Yeah, so go in like order like that. And I'm sure we're gonna need a bunch of adjustments as everything goes up. But all that is gonna go up there. So stay tuned for the next phase, putting it all together. Basically, hopefully you can see the process. Up in here, there's the rigid foam. Maybe it's better this way, I don't know. Over the plywood, right, which is put on with some screws, and basically you just use contractor glue, cement, to just put these over the plywood, and you just continue down, eventually closing the gaps in between with spray foam before filling the rest with insulation. So I'm going to continue on going down, and we'll show you kind of the mid process, or the result of the midpoint. Right, just taking a little break here to kind of show you the different layers here and how they work. So you can see the joists here are all packed right to the edge of the plate with insulation all around all the piping. And then you'll see over here where there's the plywood sheathing and then the rigid foam as a layer. So it's like protection 1, protection 2, protection 3. And then when all of this is filled, we'll take this insulation and pack it in any of the areas where there's a void, along with some spray foam. So anyway, just wanted to give you a little update on kind of how that looks when you pack it down. It just started raining, so I'm not going to be able to finish this up today, but you can see got all the foam, the rigid foam, and plywood, all the insulation back in the joists, all up in the cantilever. And so next episode, I'll put the rigid foam around, I'll box it around the rest of the cantilever, spray foam any of the gaps, and then fill the rest with insulation. So stay tuned. So today's project is to use this quad foam, OSI quad foam, to seal inside these little crevices, cracks, in between this foam before I go ahead and seal the roof area of this cantilever. Okay, here it is. It ain't pretty, but it gets the job done. So the next step is to block this all in with insulation and then put some rigid foam across the roof of this and basically just seal the whole top of it. Alright, as you can see, I have this built up into a nice little tub. So it's all foam on the front and the back, the sides. It's insulated up in the little the floor joist area. And then the final step is really just packing this with insulation and then covering the bottom of it. So I will give you an update on the finished product. It's a little messy, but it will certainly get the job done. All right, so this phase is done. There's foam all around the edges on the ceiling. Anywhere that foam couldn't be fit, it's all filled with insulation. You see all down the piping, all down on the edge. And so the last phase of this is to fill this cavity with insulation and then close it off. And then we'll have a airtight cantilever. Okay, after a surprise storm yesterday washed me out, I couldn't finish this. The plan today, actually the plan, I don't know how it's gonna work, is I'm gonna block the bottom, the floor of this cantilever with rigid foam, 1-inch rigid foam, create like a little shelf and start piling insulation into that void. I'm just going to kind of work down until I get to the end, and be a little more careful around the piping, where I don't think I'm going to be able to get rigid foam in a lot of it, but I can insulate and then strap it. And then the last step after that will be just putting plywood over the bottom, ready to accept the siding, soffit siding to go in there. So that's the plan for today. Stay tuned. All right, here you go. You get the idea. This is unfaced R30. Probably overkill. Actually, all of this is probably overkill, but it will certainly be warm. And I just tucked it in this void up here, and then I capped the bottom with rigid foam, which I will seal around the edges. And then the last part of this will be a plywood base that the soffit will be nailed on. But I will continue this all the way down the soffit and hope to have this done relatively quickly. Here's a little update on what it's looking like. Definitely running through this. Yeah, that's pretty much what it looks like. When it's done, I just have to kind of patch this little spot because the pipe hangs below where I can get the rigid foam, so I might have to channel it out to get it under there. But really running through this, and I'm actually almost to the end where I can silicone the edges, seal it up, and throw the plywood up. Alright, get you a little closer perspective of this is now all sealed up. And just about to finish it off. It came out pretty good. But could be overkill. Probably gonna be super warm, but you know what? There's a bathroom above this. So I wanted to make sure that not only is it climate controlled up above, but that the pipes coming into this cantilever are well insulated as well. So big project, relatively, can be done. Probably overkill, but peace of mind. And I did it myself, so there you have it. So I opted to use this sealant tape. It's a foil sealant tape for around the edges. And I figured that will make it completely airtight and should never have any sort of leak of air in the winter. So that's it, pretty much done. The only thing left is to attach the plywood under it, and then of course put the soffit, the plastic soffit over it to pretty it up. That's the project. Hope this helps somebody out there. Like I said, I am not a professional YouTuber. I don't make these kind of videos, but I was looking around, I didn't really find anything that could help me out on my project, so I figured I would just document this along the way and put it out there. So if you have any comments, please be kind. Have a great day.